I'm afraid you don't stand a ghost of a chance in a duel against me.
He didn't stand a ghost of a chance.
Hello everyone, it is me, Pui. I am back again today with another GOAT video, and I have to tell you, I am so excited about this one. I've been working on this deck for over a month. I finally brought it out to Obelisk 17, got 3rd place there, brought it to a GOAT Format Friday tournament, got 2nd place there, had to drop in the grand finals. If you can't tell from the video's title, we are playing ZomBEATDOWN today. That is an aggressive zombie deck looking to play with the ratios of what people consider standard for zombie and really try to attack the meta where it hurts. I think got some great results, did some things people would find unconventional and were rewarded for it. I think with a little bit of practice, you could get similar results yourself. So without further ado, let's check out the deck. So this here is my ZomBEATDOWN deck that I brought. This is the list exactly as I had it for Obelisk 17. Looking at this list, you might think the quantities seem kind of mishmash and that there's a lot of questionable 2-ofs, a lot of questionable 1-ofs, a lot of things that just don't make a lot of sense. Why is this card included? Why is this card at that amount? I assure you this deck has been extensively tested, and we tried a lot of these ratios out in a lot of ways, and this was the results I came to, and I'm more than happy with it as it is. So of course, for starters, we are playing the zombie engine being centered around Pyramid Turtle, which can search out both Ryukaki and Vampire Lord. Vampire Lord being a 2000 and 1500 monster. When it inflicts battle damage, you declare one card type, send that card type from your opponent's deck to the graveyard. Unfortunately, it's their choice which they send, so this effect kind of sucks. More importantly, this card comes back during your standby phase if your opponent destroys it with a card effect, which includes Solemn Judgment, and this is absolutely huge. Ryukaki, of course, people are much more familiar with. 2400, 2000. At the end of a damage step, if this card battled a warrior or spellcaster type monster, destroy that monster. Now, you may think that neither of these effects are relevant, but I assure you that this deck makes them very much so. Certainly, Vampire Lord is a card that people have been quite down on out of the zombie brewers that do exist, and I assure you this card is actually a lot better than people give it credit for. Of course, Pyramid Turtle can search either of these big guys out when it's destroyed by battle, and Giant Rat can search out itself another Pyramid Turtle, or Exiled Force. So we have 6 recruiters, all of which can chain into these very large beat sticks. At its core, this means that we can win most battle-based interactions in a vacuum, especially in the early game and often in the late game. Because we're playing this many recruiters, we also have the opportunity to play creature swap. Very simple, classic trick. Give your opponent a recruiter, beat over that recruiter, get another recruiter or another target. In this case, if that target is a turtle, you can get a Vampire Lord or a Ryukaki off of a creature swap. I spoke in my last video about how I think this card can have like a one of power cards worth of strength and a swing in the tempo of the game if used correctly. And certainly with 6 recruiters, we can certainly get those sorts of swings. So at its core, aggressive decks that we're facing are really bad against these zombies and recruiters, of course, because we have bigger bodies and we can get them off of smaller bodies, so it's really hard to attack through us. But what about Chaos Turbo? Obviously, that's the big question. How are we beating Chaos Turbo? The answer is a large quantity of this deck is actually geared towards Chaos Turbo. You've, of course, probably spotted your eye on 3 Kaikus, and we are playing Exiled Force. Both of these fundamentally disrupt Turbo's plan. We are, of course, playing Noble Bit of Crossout. Creature Swap also serves as face down hate, but in addition to those, we are playing 2 copies of Trap Dust Shoot and 2 copies of Skill Drain, and I think I'd say this is probably one of the first questionable ratios in the deck. Generally, when you're playing Skill Drain deck, you want to play 3 Skill Drains, but I found here that drawing 2 Skill Drains was definitely suicide. We're already playing enough bricks in the deck with Ryukaki and Vampire Lord. If we draw these in our hand, it's actually really hard to properly use them, so I didn't want to have more dead draws. 2 Skill Drain is plenty. If you resolve one, it usually can sack Chaos Turbo, can definitely sack most control decks if they don't negate it. And then on top of that, we also have Trap Dust Shoot, which can both sack the opponent by giving us that free information, ripping their best card, and letting us control the flow of the game with the full information. But these cards also can be used at the same time. So in redundancy, Trap Dust Shoot kind of works in 2. Skill Drain doesn't work at all in 2, so it's a lot better that we can have Dust Shoot and Skill Drain at the same time with these ratios. That being said, I am looking for both of these cards in most of my games against Chaos, because the ability to look at our opponent's hand or negate all the effects is pretty huge. I want to talk particularly about Skill Drain's role in this deck against Turbo, because obviously it negates flips, but it also lets us beat straight over Spy with Ryukaki. You have Kaki and Skill Drain, and you can hit over the Spy, it gets destroyed, and its effect is negated. But the amount of stuff that Skill Drain does goes beyond that, because Skill Drain plus Kaki as a combination actually answers virtually any monster in a standard Chaos Turbo deck. Assailant's negated, Faith is negated, Deco is negated, Sook is negated, Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning is negated, and Ryukaki's effect is not negated, meaning if you crash a Kaki into BLS, that BLS will be destroyed. In addition, Chaos Sorcerer is negated, that only has 2,300 attack, so Kaki plus Skill Drain, you beat right over a Sork. Kaki and Skill Drain, huge combination in this deck, along with everything else that's going on. We have a ton of face down hate, we have the Dust Shoot, and we have the Skill Drain. So this deck, with the right draws and the right combinations, just completely smashes over Turbo. You saw in that game as well versus AJ Hussein, we have a pretty good staying power, surprisingly so long as we don't draw too many of the big targets in our hand. As for the Warrior matchup, the main is pretty solid against it. The side gets even better. Vampire Lord, people are generally not so happy with this card because it has 2,000 attack. The joke is that if it had even one more attack point, it would be amazing in GOATs, because Blade Knight crashes into it, Berserk Gorilla crashes into it. Here's the thing about Blade Knight, Blade Knight's effect is negated by Skill Drain. All of a sudden, 1,600 monster, we actually have protection, we've got Ring of Destruction, we've got Mirror Force, so we can circumstantially protect the Vampire Lord, and this card, people really don't talk about how much this blanks so many cards, especially with Chaos Turbo going back to Raigeki Break recently, and we have Warrior decks going a lot heavier on battle traps than usual, and even Chaos Turbo decks using battle traps to answer things. Vampire Lord just ignores so much stuff that the meta is doing at the top right now and just gets the comeback next turn. You get to blank so many cards. So I've seen games where this card goes through like 3 cards because they have to not die and they have to keep protecting themselves by destroying it even though it's going to come back. The effect sucks. Always name spell or trap, never monster unless you have Kaiku and you can like trick them into putting a Serp in and you can hit them with Kaiku, but most of the time, name spell or trap, don't name monster, it'll go badly for you. The control matchup can be quite good as long as it's not a decree matchup. We obviously have skill drain, we have solemn judgment to negate stuff. Goats can be a little dicey, but we can generally hit through them, so be careful with your creature swaps while they have goats or potentially have goats set, and try to go first if you can. It gets a little better in the side. Speaking of the side, let's look at that and how it improves certain matchups. For starters, for warriors, we have 2 Sakuretsu armor, 2 Dust Tornado, and 2 Scapegoats. Hear me out here. And we take out our Trap Dust Shoots, our Noblemen, and our Skill Drain for that. In addition, we have Brain Control for the warrior matchup, and I also, in previous builds, have played Smashing Ground in this card's place, and I highly recommend you try that as well. Dust Tornado is obviously great because it can remove some pesky sets and keep you ahead of things. Sakuretsu armor lets you safely take attacks and such. And of course, Scapegoat is the interesting one, because what Scapegoat does is it lets you slow down the pace of the game until you can find another recruiter or another trap of some kind and gain back control with that. You also, of course, can use it with creature swap, so it deals double duty there. Even if all 4 goats just get run over, generally this card has helped me win games in the warrior matchup, and also has use in Reasoning Gate to block from getting OTK'd. So for the Reasoning Gate matchup, you have Scapegoats and also the recruiters to protect yourself, and that's really useful there. The next big deck I wanted to prepare for in the side for this build of the deck was Chaos Control, particularly Decree builds, because obviously those are always running around. For that, I brought in 2 Ashura Priests, 1 to 2 Mobius the Frost Monarch, and Book of Moon. Book of Moon being an easy way to get rid of Balter, get rid of Hair, just a simple removal option that we still have through Decree. Ashura Priest, of course, helps get rid of their goats. In other builds, and in a current build, I'm actually using Wanghu here for its double duty against Panda Burn, but I wanted to use Ashura for its combination with creature swap in this matchup, particularly because I was only expecting to face goats and not really Ojamas. And then lastly, if you see Decree, then you want to bring in Mobius because it is a non-trap way to remove the Decree, which can be quite useful. With that out of the way, I want to talk about a couple of elephants in the room, stuff that might be kind of interesting, and my opinions on zombie deck building that I think a lot of people should consider. Thing number 1, I am not playing Card of Safe Return. This is for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, I'm not playing a lot of Revival. Reason number 2, I think the card isn't actually as good as it seems in GOAT. I think it's actually secretly a trap. The absolute best case scenario with Card of Safe Return is that Vampire Lord is destroyed by a card effect, and then brought back by its own effect, and that draws you a card. In any other case, all that Card of Safe Return does is replace the card you're using to revive something else. And even worse than that, it might just get destroyed. I think most of the time this card will be a -1 at worst, possibly just not really build any advantage at all, and I think for an aggressive deck like this, it's just simply unneeded. Speaking of not playing many revivals, only 1 Book of Life in a zombie deck. Hear me out here, we're not actually playing a lot of zombies. We're only playing the Pyramid Turtles, the Ryukaki, and the Vampire Lord. In previous builds, that DD Warrior Lady was actually a regenerating mummy, which I still think is a perfectly fine option. But in this situation, Book of Life was just bricking over and over again, especially when I drew 2 Book of Life. I find that this deck doesn't need more than 3 revivals. 3 feels like plenty. You generally draw them by the late game when you need them at 3. If you draw more, then there are bricks in your hand at the start of the game, and that can get really, really rough. This isn't Delinkquent's deck. We're not playing Tribute to the Doomed. Our zombies go to the graveyard in the natural course of the game, and then we bring them back. There are even some warrior decks that actually cut on Call of the Haunted and only play Prima, or the opposite. They don't need that many revivals, and I don't think this deck does either. Speaking of, the third big thing is that, hey, we're playing traps at all in a zombie deck. Didn't Delinkquent 100% prove that Decree Zombies is the best way to play zombies? No. Not in the slightest. And I'm not just talking about Zombie Drain either. I think having a real trap lineup for zombies is absolutely huge. These are traps that sack people. These are traps that answer a lot of things. Obviously, we have the Trap Trinity. These cards can answer all sorts of things. Having access to them is great. Skill Drain negates all effects, which almost always benefits us over them. Solemn Judgment can negate any problem we have. Trap Dust Shoot can give us a full view of what the game is going to look like from beginning to end. And instead of playing Tribute to the Doomed, we're actually playing Raigeki Break here. It does have to be set, which is unfortunate, but I find the ability to destroy anything and to destroy it during my opponent's turn or at any point in the game at spell speed 2 is a lot more useful. This card can be played to your taste, but I found it perfectly good, and it helps get a zombie into the graveyard just like Tribute to the Doom does. So that's the deck, and as promised, I'll be showing you all my Obelisk 17 run matches next week. Yes, I know, I'm sorry, not cool, but editing takes a really long time, and I promise these matches will be worth your while. In the meantime, I have the deck lists below, so you can try it out yourself, both the Obelisk version and an alternate version, and if you want to know when that next video is coming out, then you should just consider subscribing. I try to put out a video every week, usually on Fridays, but you should definitely subscribe so you know exactly when that is. For now, I've been Pui, I hope you enjoy the deck, and I will see you next week. Bye.